So welcome to Friday's Greater Life CoffeeCast, and today is a very unusual day in the history of coffee casting. You see, last night as I was walking my beloved dog on the beach near my house, something very, very strange happened. And from that very strange thing, I learned some very powerful business lessons. So there I was, strolling over the rocks to climb back up onto the coast path. And I've always got my eye out for, what I used to see in a kid's cartoon called, I can't remember what the name of the cartoon was. It Lily something. But this Irish girl who lived by the beach, used to run down to the beach and find what she called sea treasure. And so essentially just stuff that had washed up that might be, to a young girl, treasure. And yesterday I found some very significant sea treasure that had been washed up on the beach, or on the rocks rather. I, first of all, found a beautiful curved piece of driftwood that had been aged and shaped by the sea, obviously for many, many years. And just beyond it was a strange black rectangular package. And as I bent down to inspect this strange black rectangular package, I could see that the black was in fact a rubber coating protecting the package itself, which was essentially a rectangular block about the size of a normal size hardback book, if that's not quite A4, but if you think, a bit smaller than A4, a bit bigger than A5, hardback book. And it was beneath the black wrapping, entirely wrapped in cellophane and what looks like almost like see-through gaffer tape. And I thought, wow, this looks remarkably like some of the packages I've seen in various movies. And just over the rocks was a fisherman. And so I picked up the package and indicated to the fisherman with a look of curiosity on my face and walked over. And said to him, what do you think is this? What's this? Is this what I think it is? And he, perhaps because he's got one of those lifestyles in his past where that sort of thing was part of what he did every Saturday night, he got very wide-eyed and very excited. And he's like, oh my God, is that? And so we peeled away the packaging. And my fisherman friend used his little fisherman's knife to establish that, yes, indeed, I had successfully found on the beach a kilogram of pure cocaine. And if I'd wanted, apparently according to the fisherman, if I'd wanted a quick sale, it would have been 10 grand. If I'd sold it in, more traditional baggies or however drug dealers do it, then it would have been around £30,000 worth that I was holding there in my hand on the beach. Now, for someone who is running a startup and who is, actually actively looking for ways to improve their financial position, to be holding 30 grand's worth of highly in-demand drugs, well, you can imagine it did give me a moment of moral pause. Especially when the fisherman was like, oh, mate, I'd keep that, mate. I'd keep that. I wouldn't be handing that in. And I had to do some thinking. And I also had to do some checking in with myself. I have a process whereby some people call it body dowsing. And for me, I ask myself a question. And if I lean forward, it's a yes. And if I lean back, it's a no. And I leant forward and said, should I be keeping this? Sorry, I tuned in and said, should I be keeping this? And I rocked back and I said, should I be taking this to the police station in my local town? And I rocked forward very clearly. So I was under no doubts that was the right answer. However, it did make me think. And there are some very significant business lessons we can take from this. In fact, life lessons. The first, of course, is that your network, genuinely in this case, is your net worth. In that, had I known someone, had I been in the kind of networks where there were major time drug dealers who could have handed me over 10 grand of cash and I'd have given them my brick of cocaine, then it would have given me more tricky moral dilemmas, because actually, no questions, no fuss, here you go, 10 grand, thanks very much. Like, that would have been more of a challenge to think about and to be with. But I know no one like that in my network. Therefore, I was not able to leverage that wealth opportunity, even if I'd wanted to. Okay? So that first piece, the old adage that your network is your net worth, here, through my drugs on the beach example, proves very true. Now, I'm also at the moment listening to a wonderful book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And in it, he talks about how business owners very rarely consider what he calls the second order consequences. And in this example, it's quite instructive, because I know a few people who party on a Saturday night, and I'm sure I could have, over the course of 12 months or so, kept them happily partying for many, many hours over many, many weekends and earned a fair amount of cash. However, the second order consequences of that is that I would have been introducing into my life, into my sphere, and most importantly, into the sphere of life of my young children, influences that, let's be honest, I probably didn't want there for my young children. The possible risk of some person getting wind of what I was up to and coming to my house looking for a quick score, and perhaps not even wanting to pay for it, and, using my children as leverage, all of that suddenly becomes a possibility the second I decide to keep hold of that brick of cocaine. And this goes deeper, though, on the risk piece, is that obviously there were second order consequences that I would be introducing of high risk. But of course, the next piece is that the overall risk of keeping hold of it at all. And here, the question is, well, look, you've got this thing that's really valuable, really in demand, and no one knows you've got it. So on some level, yeah, you could play it safe. You could just keep it and, sell it at some point. Now, the risk on some level, or the chances on some level of getting caught were in this case fairly slim. I have no prior criminal record. I have none of those things. I'm, an upstanding citizen, all of that stuff. And had I got caught in any way, shape or form, I'm guaranteed to be spending time behind bars. So, even though the risk itself is minimal, the consequence of that risk is utterly catastrophic to my life and the life of my children. And therefore, no matter how small the risk, it is not a risk worth taking. And so it's a really important question in all areas of life. Where are you taking seemingly small risks, but actually that even if the likelihood of that risk is so small in terms of it actually happening, the impact is utterly catastrophic. And the reality is that some of you listening to this have drunk and drive in the last month, or drunk and driven in the last month. And again, you may know your limits, all that sort of stuff, all that old, those classic cliches. And if you get caught, or worse, if you have an accident that could have been avoided by not drinking, like the consequences of that risk actually occurring are utterly catastrophic. So the question must then become, is that risk worth taking? And it's such a fascinating conversation because, of course, entrepreneurship itself is all about being able to be with risk, to assess risk, and to choose to act in such a way that the upside is maximized and the downside is minimized. And I had a very real lived experience of having to wrestle with that last night. And finally, the last piece that I share with you is a principle that I actually shared in my own book, Creative Uprising, and I had a really wonderful reminder of in Garrett Gunderson's book, Killing Sacred Cows. And as I was driving to the police station, I was just like, am I doing the right thing handing this in? And it's like, maybe my soul, my spirit, my higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, higher self. I just heard this voice saying, George, is your sole purpose selling drugs? And of course the answer is no. And so therefore it was an absolute no-brainer, because the concept I took from Garrett Gunderson's book is that there is no greater return on investment than when you invest in your sole purpose. And as I sat with this idea, this notion, it occurred to me that the cocaine on my car seat as I was driving to the police station represented the search of hundreds of people for something that I was already brilliantly offering to the customers of my new business, which is connection, community, meaning. And all of those things I know how to facilitate in groups and one-to-one situations really well, because I've spent the time putting the effort in, and it's something that I love. And therefore I was like, wow. And that thing that I can offer, that experience of what we call communitas, which is like a group flow state and deep connection to self and to others, that thing that I am really masterful at facilitating, is worth many, 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 many times more than even if I chopped up that piece of cocaine into lots of little bits. Over the next decade, my capacity to support people to experience connection and community and love is going to be worth many, many more times what I might have been able to sell my brick of cocaine for. Because there is no greater return on investment than the return on investment you will get from investing in and sharing your sole purpose. And I never expected a kilo of cocaine found on the beach to teach me such profound lessons. But there we are. This has been Friday's CoffeeCast. I hope you've taken something from it. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we kick off with health, the pillar of health, for our next round of Greater Life CoffeeCasts. Have a great weekend.